Babylon 5 Season 2 Review. Hello and welcome to my review of Season 2 of the American science fiction series Babylon 5, which ran from 1994 to 1995 for a total of 22 episodes. Now, the first episode of Season 2 is entitled Points of Departure, and there's a bit of a shock in store, especially for people watching the show for the first time, because Captain Sinclair has buggered off. Basically, he's been reassigned, and that's it. He's gone. Obviously, there were behind-the-scenes reasons for this, some of which we didn't really know about until relatively recently. Just a few years ago, Michael O'Hare was seriously ill and had to leave the show, basically. Which is sad. He was a good character, a good actor. I liked him. But we have a new captain. We have Captain John Sheridan instead, played by fairly famous, at least those days, TV actor Bruce Boxleitner. Now, you know, this sort of thing is something that kind of gets my goat at times when a show does this. You know, a major character just disappears between seasons. That can be kind of annoying and not something that I'm particularly fond of. Obviously, there are extenuating circumstances in this instance, but, you know, the show does a good job of coping with the change. And we do get to see Sinclair again a little bit down the line. Boxleitner, Sheridan, makes a strong first impression, and this is a good season premiere, setting things up. The next episode is Revelations. This is continuing on from the previous episode and the season finale of season 1, because Garibaldi's still in a coma after having been shot. Delenn finally gets out of her chrysalis, and she's now basically half human. And we get more of the stuff with Mr. Morden and the Shadows. Jakar is now aware that something is going on, but he can't get anybody to listen to him. And we get some more information on our new lead, Captain Sheridan, about his late wife, and resolving a few things like the story about what happened at the end of the Minbari War. This revelation does kind of come as a bit of an anticlimax, simply because of the fact that Sinclair's not there. I mean, I get that they had to kind of wrap it up because the actor's gone, but the fact that they're having to wrap this up, something that was kind of so ingrained with that character and one of the mysteries about that character, without the character there, does make it seem a bit of an anticlimax. Although the good news is that there is more to come on that, because we do see Sinclair again down the line. Again, it's a good episode, strong stuff. The next episode is The Geometry of Shadows. This is another good episode. I will say this about season 2. I think it's generally stronger than season 1. Even kind of milder episodes just seem to have a greater confidence to them. This is a good example of that. There's not really much major going on in this episode, but it's still a solid episode. The Technomarges stuff is interesting and amusing. Yeah. As is the subplot with Ivanova and the Drazi. And it's a little bit silly, but it works well and it's entertaining. The next episode is A Distant Star. This is a solid episode. Again, it's not a massively important one, although there's some fallout from what Delenn has done to herself with the Minbari. And it's just a good story about a ship being stranded in hyperspace, and Sheridan's determined to find them and rescue them. I think the guest star here is Russ Tamblyn, if I'm not mistaken, who of course was Dr. Jacoby in Twin Peaks. The next episode is The Long Dark. This is kind of a horror episode, basically. It's about a cryonic exploration vessel from 100 years ago there's only one person left alive who's been in cryogenic suspension the whole time, but there's something else on board that ship, and it follows her onto Babylon 5. It's basically a horror episode. There are some strands kind of linking it to the major arc, though they're fairly flimsy. It's really just a standalone sci-fi horror, and it's very well done. It's very entertaining. We get Dwight Schultz, Howling Mad Murdoch, or Reg Barkley, depending on your preference. The episode is written by Scott Frost, who's actually Mark Frost's brother, and he actually wrote at least one episode of Twin Peaks. So there's another Twin Peaks connection. I like this one. It's one of the best of the season, in my opinion. Certainly one of the best that isn't really connected to the main plot. The next episode is Spider in the Web. This is a Talia episode. We don't get too many of those. And it's a good, solid one. An old friend of Talia is murdered by somebody who is supposedly a Martian resistance member, but he's kind of been co-opted and changed and brainwashed, basically. The problem with this episode is they kind of dropped this thread, or they merged it with something else because of the name of the organization was kind of copyright to something else out of a computer game, so they kind of dropped it. It doesn't really matter because you can kind of figure it's Psycor or some other corrupt agency that we know Earth is corrupt as hell by this point anyway, and it's this kind of thing that they do anyway. But the fact that they kind of dropped the name of the organization kind of makes it feel like they dropped this thread, which is a bit unfortunate. But on its own, again, this is a good, strong, solid episode. The next episode is Soulmates. This is an okay episode. It's not one of the strongest of the season. There's some amusing stuff with Londo's 3 wives. There's some amusing stuff with Delenn and Ivanova. She's still kind of having trouble getting used to being human, or part human at least. And there's some interesting character stuff with Talia and her ex-husband. It's just not a particularly major or particularly exciting episode. It's okay though, it's not bad. The next episode is A Race Through Dark Places, and this is the long-awaited return of Walter Koenig as Psychop Alfred Bester. This time he's looking for an underground railroad that is helping rogue telepaths to escape from the Psychor. And his information is that somebody on Babylon 5 is helping, if not organizing, this underground railroad. And he's not wrong. This is another really strong episode. You know when Bester shows up, you're going to get some good stuff, and this is no exception to that. It's a good, solid sequel to Time War, the previous season. It's about time we saw Bester again. And then, of course, the next episode is The Coming of Shadows, which is also the overall banner title of Season 2, which indicates just how important this episode is, just like Signs and Portents did with Season 1. The Centauri Emperor dies, and his legacy is basically tainted by Londo and his collaborator Lord Reefer, who are basically trying to take over the Centauri Empire and bring them back to their former glory by becoming warmongers again. This has a brief kind of video message cameo from Michael O'Hare as Sinclair, and introduces the concept of the Rangers, this mysterious organization who are, shall we say, keeping an eye on things. This is a really good episode. It's a fairly famous one, and for good reason. It's very dramatic stuff, and very important and pivotal. The next episode is Gropos. This one's a bit of a bore, honestly. There's some amusing stuff with Garibaldi and one of the Earth Force Marines, one of the female Earth Force Marines. But the bulk of the plot is about Stephen Franklin and his relationship with his father. Oh God, this American obsession with daddy issues. It's very American. it's a bit, I don't know. This one's a bit boring, honestly. It doesn't really do anything for me. Probably the worst of the season, actually, in my thing. This sort of relationship stuff just sends me into a catatonic state. The next episode is All Alone in the Night, in which Sheridan is abducted by aliens. Yes, it's Babylon 5, not the X-Files, though it might as well be. uh, Again, this is a good episode. There's also some stuff with Delenn again, because the Grey Council have not been impressed by the fact that she's taken it upon herself to become part human, basically following this prophecy that's connected with the shadows. They basically think she's been very arrogant to make this decision herself. This is a solid episode. It's not one of the best of the season, but it's certainly an improvement on the previous episode. It doesn't send me to sleep anyway, so that's got to be a good thing. The next episode is Acts of Sacrifice. The main plot here is G'Kar trying to get support from Sheridan and the Earth Alliance, with the Narn basically not doing very well in the war with the Centauri. This is another strong episode. Things are getting far more and more unpleasant for the Narn, and G'Kar's getting more and more desperate. There's a very silly subplot with Ivanova and this alien race that they're trying to get an alliance with. It's basically a comedy plot. I'm not sure how well it works, although Claudia Christian is amusing and clearly enjoying herself. The next episode is Hunter Prey. This is a really good episode, probably one of the best of the season in my opinion. With a missing doctor has come on board the station, who is basically on the run because he's got evidence about President Santiago's death, that it was basically an assassination, and that President Clark, who has assumed the position after Santiago's death, was probably involved in the assassination. So, and of course, they want him. They want to get rid of him, and the command staff are trying to get to him before anyone else, so they're having to work against their own people as well to try and find him and get the evidence from him and get him off the station. Now, of course, the only problem with this is that later events kind of supersede it, so it's basically kind of irrelevant in what happens with this plot, but it's still a very dramatic and very gripping episode. The next episode is There All the Honor Lies. Sheridan kills a Minbari in self-defense. Basically, the whole thing's a bit of a setup. They're trying to a section of the Minbari that don't like him because he's one of the few Earth commanders, captains, who was able to destroy one of the Minbari ships during the Minbari War, and they hate him for it, and they're trying to get rid of him as commander of Babylon 5. This is an okay episode. Again, there's an amusing comedy subplot with Ivanova. I'd say this one works probably slightly better than the other one, about a gift shop that's selling Babylon 5 merchandise, although the funniest bit of this is Londo objecting because his doll is not anatomically accurate. That's another good episode. I like that one. The next episode is And Now for a Word, which is basically an entire episode that's done like it's a documentary. It's an ISN news crew making a documentary on Babylon 5. It's an interesting kind of gimmick episode. There's some good stuff in there. It's an interesting presentation, and there's some kind of subtle elements of kind of propaganda in there of how they're framing things. They do kind of a sequel to this episode in season 4, which doesn't work quite as well because it's a bit more heavy-handed. But this is a pretty solid and clever episode. The next episode is in the Shadow of Zahadun, which is a pretty major episode and another one of the best episodes of the season, I would say. Morden is back, and Sheridan finds out that this guy was supposedly on the ship that his wife was on when it blew up. So how the hell is this son of a bitch still alive? There's some really intense drama on this. Sheridan is seriously going out of control because he really suspects there's something really bizarre going on, but he still doesn't understand just how much and how serious this situation is, and people like Delenn and Kosh are getting very worried, because if he keeps pushing Morden, he may find out the truth about the shadows, and they don't want this revealed as yet because they're not ready to fight them yet. This episode also introduces Night Watch on the station, this group looking for seditious individuals. Basically, they're like a Babylon 5 version of people who patrol Twitter looking for people being politically incorrect. Yeah, this is another really good, really dramatic, and really ominous episode. The next episode is Knives. Oh god, here we go. Like Legacies, from season 1, I don't remember anything about this episode. God damn it, how can this keep happening? I don't remember this episode. Londo is reunited with an old friend, only to be caught in the middle of agendas, and Sheridan is invaded by an alien life form. I don't remember this episode at all, so I'm afraid I don't know what to say about it. That's bizarre. The next episode is Confessions and Lamentations, in which the Markab race get the COVID. Well, maybe not, but a deadly plague of some variant anyway, and extinction looks likely, unless Dr. Franklin can find a cure. And this is a decent episode. It's a fairly dramatic episode. I'm not sure it works quite as well as it could, mainly because you don't really care about the Markabs that much. I mean, it's not like we have any main characters who are Markab, so it kind of feels a bit, it's dramatic, and yet it kind of feels almost like cop-outy in a way, because we don't really know anybody in the Markab race, so it's not like it really personally affects either the main characters or us. Yeah, I mean, granted, you don't really. It would have been difficult to have done an episode like this with one of the main races, because that might have seriously fucked up things. But on the other hand, doing it with a race that's relatively irrelevant just kind of feels like a bit irrelevant. The next episode is Divided Loyalties, and again, this is an absolute cracker. This is one of the best episodes of the season. We get the return of Lyta Alexander, played by Patricia Tallman, who we last saw in the pilot episode, The Gathering, pre-season 1. And she was replaced by Talia in season 1. And she's back, and she's on the run. And she has information that one of the command staff may actually be a sleeper agent for the Psi Corps and not even realize it themselves, which is a pretty chilling concept. This is a really, really good episode, and, there's no cop-out here without giving away spoilers. One of the main characters is not who they think they are and not who we think they are, and this is a really dramatic episode. The only kind of problem with this episode was that this was one of the first episodes I actually saw, so obviously the impact of the reveal was kind of lost on me a little bit, because I think I'd only seen like 2 episodes or something from season 1 on VHS before this, and I kind of caught this on TV, and I thought it was good, but obviously a lot of it, the impact was lost on me because I didn't know half of these characters anyway. But yeah, this is a cracking episode. The next episode is The Long Twilight Struggle, which is another really good episode. The Centauri war machine is making mincemeat of the Narns, and they're heading towards the Narn homeworld. Of course, they're being helped by the Shadows. And the Narn fleet, what's left of them, come up with a desperate plan to try and fight back, stop them from reaching the Narn homeworld, even though if they fail, it could basically be the end of the war, and they'll be fucked. This is a really, really good episode, very dramatic. I'm trying not to give too many spoilers here, even though it's kind of difficult not to review this show without doing that. But yeah, this is a really strong episode. The next episode is Comes the Inquisitor, in which Sheridan and Delenn are tested by the Vorlons to see whether they're really ready to be the leaders of the people, the force against the Shadows. This is an okay episode. It's one of those episodes where B5 kind of has a tendency to do this. They use these kind of British archetypes, like the one with the Holy Grail in season 1. I think there's another episode like this in season 3 as well. There is the King Arthur one, isn't there, with Michael York. This one kind of does something similar to that with another historical figure, mythological figure, historical. And again, it doesn't really work, because you kind of get the feeling that the Americans don't really get these things. They like the idea, but they don't really get them. And it always feels like these things don't really work in B5. They kind of stick out like a sore thumb because there's no real understanding behind the usage of them. That's my problem with this episode. It's not a bad episode, but you just get the sense here it really feels kind of shoehorned in, this kind of twist ending. The next episode is The Fall of Night, which is the season finale. As you would expect from a season finale, and was the case with season 1's finale, shit is hitting fans all over the place. B5 gives sanctuary to a Narn warship, which does not impress the Centauri, only to find that Sheridan is not getting support from Earth Force. In fact, they seem to not give a crap. They seem to be more on the side of the Centauri than the Narn, who are being wiped out, which is not something Sheridan is very comfortable with. And Nightwatch starts getting more and more power and influence on B5. This is another really strong episode, a great season finale. We finally get to see sort of who or what is inside Kosh, and it's a very interesting twist that opens up a lot of further questions as to the true nature of the Vorlons. This is a really good episode. It's a great season finale. What more is there to say? Now, season 2 as a whole, I would say it's definitely better than season 1. I mean, I like season 1. I know some people are down on it, but I still like it. But there's no doubt that season 2 is a much stronger season. I mean, I think that's kind of inevitable in a way. Partly it's because of, we're in the second season now. Everybody kind of knows what they're doing and they're getting on with it. They're not learning anymore. They're getting on with it. Add to that the fact that we're not introducing things anymore. We're kind of starting the main plot now. We're not just laying down the universe and seeding in a few things here and there. Things are really starting to kick off. So it's inevitably going to be a much more dramatic and satisfying season. But even with that in mind, yeah, this is a really, really good season. Probably one of the top 3 seasons of B5. I would give Babylon 5 Season 2 a strong B+.